Hello and welcome to Leveraging AI. This is Isar Metis, your host, and I've got an exciting show for you today. Maybe the question I get asked the most, especially from business leaders, CEOs, and other C suite and executives, is how to get started. How does a business, not an individual, go into the process of implementing AI in an effective way that really transforms the business? And this is exactly going to be the question we're going to answer in today's show with the assistance of Paul Bratcher, who has been helping companies implement technology for the past 20 years. As always, at the end of the episode, I will review some exciting and big news that happened in the AI world this week. And now let's dive into the framework that can help businesses implement AI successfully. In the next few years, AI technology will change our world dramatically. Whether you are a business executive trying to catapult your business forward, or just somebody who refuses to be left behind and want to advance your career, this is the show for you. I'm your host, Isar Metis, a serial entrepreneur and an AI enthusiast. You'll hear invaluable practical tips from innovative business leaders, AI practitioners, and some of the brightest AI minds in our world today on how you can leverage AI in ethical ways to advance your career and grow your business. Hello and welcome to Leveraging AI, the podcast that shares practical, ethical ways to leverage AI to improve efficiency, grow your business, and advance your career. This is Isar Metis, your host, and I've got a special guest for you today. Paul Bratcher has been in the forefront of technology his entire life. He has been implementing digital transformation and emerging technologies in anything from huge international large corporations through his own entrepreneurship journey, as well as holding different fractional leadership positions in various size and types of companies. So he has over 20 years of experience in implementing new technologies in businesses as a transformative process. And I hope he's not mad for me dating him by saying it's 20 years, but he has a lot of experience in doing that. So it's not surprising that in this past year, he has been helping companies implement artificial intelligence in businesses because that's the new technology that's around. But for him, it's just another one of those technologies that he's helping businesses implement, which makes it very interesting because he has a unique approach on how to do this right. How can and should a business look at AI from a more holistic approach instead of jumping into the tactics? Instead of that, looking at what is the best use of AI for our business, how to figure that out. And this is going to be the core of our conversation. I think this is incredibly important to any business today because more or less every business today is considering implementing AI, and most businesses don't know exactly where to start. And Paul is the perfect person to have that conversation with. So I'm very excited to have Paul as a guest. Paul, welcome to Leveraging AI.
Hey, thanks, man. So it's great to be here. And yeah, I don't mind you dating me at all. I think myself and the other two founders of our company, between us, we worked out we have 750,000 hours of experience of implementing transformation in UK retail.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah,
That's a really big number.
we've done some things and we've learned some things along the way. So hopefully some of those will come out in today's conversation.
Awesome. So I really think let's just dive right in. If I'm a business owner and there's all this AI craze going around and there's a huge FOMO going on of I got to implement AI because everybody else is doing it. And if not, I'm going to lose the competitive edge and the competition is going to eat my lunch. What are the first things as a business owner or somebody's in leadership I need to consider and look at before I start diving into an implementation process?
So I think the first thing I see CEOs ask me this all the time is why and where should I start? That's like the first question. And the first kind of little bit of advice is if you're interested in AI and you've been listening to AI, then you'll build this mindset that everybody's doing AI. And actually, when I speak to a wide broad of companies, a few are doing AI, a few are doing it really well. A lot of people are trying to answer the how do I start question.
Yeah.
And my first answer to that is you need to start. Because that is step one of the process. You need to start. It doesn't really matter where you start, but you need to start somewhere. And this is just change practice. And the first thing I remind people is we've done change for 20 years, from digital transformation, from cloud models, from software as a service. It's the same thing. It's just happens the tooling this time is badged AI.
Yeah.
And the things we learned about change were it's entirely about the people, and it's entirely about having a clear vision, and it's entirely about being able to communicate that vision. And the tools will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So once we all take a breath from that, and then I like to explain about the overlap of changing technology. And the next thing we'll talk about is if you think about digital transformation for the last 5 years, what's really new? Like nothing. It's got to the end of its curve of activity.
Yeah.
But if you think about AI, everything's new. Every day there's thousands of new tools, there's thousands of things. So you've got these two overlapping technologies, and the digital transformation age is basically ending. And we're now entering what we describe as the augmentation age, which is about how do you join AI tooling to your workforce and generate a better solution for everyone else.
I love what you're saying. I think I want, but okay. So I want to summarize some of what you said, that it happened before, like nothing is new. It's just another new set of technologies that is coming in that the world will have to adapt to and work with. So that's not new. I think the thing that is new, and I'm roughly the same date as you. So like same production date as you. So I've been through a lot of it, mostly as CEO of tech startups or in leadership positions in tech startups. And I think the biggest difference between all those other ones that happened before is speed. So I'll give a simple example from my side, and then I would love your opinion on this as somebody who's been helping companies through this. I first logged into the internet in 93 or 94. Like my roommate at the time bought a modem. He said, there's this new thing. It's called the internet. And I'm like, okay, what does he do? He said, I don't know, but we're going to test it out. So he bought a modem. We connected. He went, one of those for a while. And then we got up like a prompt line. Those of you who remember DOS, that's what we had on the screen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so what do we do now? He's, I don't know. And that was the most underwhelming technological experience of my life because we connected to the internet, but we didn't really know what to do with it. So that was 94. The first time I got an email address is in 99 when I went backpacking in South America. So that's 5 years later. So from the moment the internet thing started to the moment I got an email address, forget about all the stuff we do today, 5 years went along, and I'm an early adopter tech guy who loves this kind of stuff and geeks around it. What's happening now is within November of last year, ChatGPT launched, and it seems like you're saying that every new day there's new tech to learn. So the speed in which things are happening and the amount of aspects of a business, I'm putting aside our social life and personal life, the amount of aspects in a business it touches is almost everything. And I think that's the biggest difference between this cycle and every other cycle, at least in my eyes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's very true. I think I help to define people's thinking in there was and there wasn't. So you remember what we're old enough to remember when there wasn't internet and then there was.
Yeah.
My sons who are sat behind me, there indeed there was iPhones and then there wasn't. And they're distinct marks in technological time. And I think right now we're on there wasn't AI and now there is.
Yeah.
It's a step, almost a binary step from the past to the next.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really fascinating that from a human change point of view is the last 20 years have really been targeted at automating away what you would broadly describe as non-knowledge worker tasks. But the new AI technology strikes straight into things like UX design, business process design, content creation, human relationship processing, CRM. It's deep into, ironically, the people who the last 10 years have been changing everyone else's job. Now it's there to have their job changed. Yeah. And it's quite interesting watching all these like project managers and business analysts and developers grasping and struggling with the change impact. So I think it's a time to, or as with all change, to be sensitive. So,
I agree.
So to that end, I guess the question that leads on to is what is AI good for?
Yeah, because you said your first recommendation is get started, but that's okay. How do I get started? What is this thing I get started with?
So we ask companies to think about AI in a couple of ways. The first is, and I'll come on to business case because we have a playbook we use for business cases, and it leans into our kind of ethical sort of social responsibility ethos as what our company is all about. But the first thing we thought about is saying, if you start to read the news and you ignore the AI cult of doom madness and clickbait and get to the principle, there's basically, you need to think about AI with in a sort of triangle of three thoughts. And at the moment, everyone's talking about thinking AI as a brain, as a thought engine, either large language models or more excitedly protein folding if you've been reading that kind of scientific research, or a conversation with a PhD in AI in about 92. And I think the first AI computer science paper was like 1957 or something like that. So it's not new. It's just accelerating.
Yeah.
So there's this talk about this one corner of the triangle, which is all about thinking. And we like to say that there's two others. To make a holistic thought about AI, you need to think about sensing or input. And that can either be things like computer vision. And a really good application for computer vision at the moment is things like mounted above assembly lines, checking assembly quality. Okay.
Yeah.
There's firms I know of that are using AI to record movements at self-checkout to try and spot people who accidentally fail to scan things and then maybe encourage them to scan them, for example. And that's all computer vision orientated. So this, you think about, you've got input, sensing. How do I gather an understanding of what's going around me? You then apply.
I saw a very interesting use case, not in vision, but they actually use vision as well, but most of it is sound. They record machines.
Yeah.
Or they don't record, they listen to machines and compare it to the original recording.
Yep.
And they can detect the beginning of a potential fault in specific parts of the machine based on a very detailed understanding of the sounds that it makes. And it helps you fix that component of the machine before the machine breaks and stops your assembly line or your production line or whatever it is that you're doing. So there's really endless number of use cases for the sensing part that you're talking about, because it allows you to connect things in the physical real world into this machine learning world where you can then make assumptions and understand things and define actions.
So then you've got sensing, thinking, and then the last one is to take action. Now in ChatGPT, action is done by the human being, and it's done using the most powerful part of ChatGPT, which is copy paste. It's the number one interface for ChatGPT: copy in, paste out, vice versa.
Yeah.
But in the rest of the world, there's quite a rich world of process automation, physical automation. In fact, Microsoft's Inspire launches last week. They've released a whole bunch of stuff around deep process mining using AI to develop and define new business processes. So there's a whole bunch of interesting AI stuff in that space. And then, of course, you get into robotics and drones and all of that kind of stuff. So when people start to talk to us about AI, our first point is, let's pick a place that will allow you to get innovation, to generate value that's going to be additive to your business and is low risk to your existing business. Because if you do an AI project and it fails, as with every change project, every naysayer in the world will say, I told you it was rubbish. And that's the lesson we've learned from 20 years of doing digital change, right? You want to get some wins under your belt. And just to put all that into concept as to how interesting alternative uses of AI could be, IKEA, the furniture manufacturer, have released and designed a set of drones, which they release into their warehouses overnight. They map the warehouse, they take off, and they do the stock count.
Interesting.
Now, interesting enough, people don't like counting stock, and we're really bad at it because we just get confused, and it's a job no one wants to do. So that for me is a really good example of a use case for a business which is AI driven, but actually it's not leapt into ChatGPT. It's trying to solve a problem that needed solving.
Okay, so let me do a quick summary, and then maybe we can dive into either additional use cases or how do I know which of the three to start with? Because you mentioned a few very important things. So first of all, you said you want the first thing you pick, let's call it your low-hanging fruit, something that will be additive, that will actually add value to the business. And that there's always two sides to that coin, right? It can solve a problem or it can increase a potential. In both cases, it's additive to the business. It needs to be low risk because you don't want to bet the farm on something that is a new technology and you're not sure how to implement it. And you want to get quick wins. So you don't want to create a 3-year project. You want to create a 2-week, month, 2 months project that can show quick benefits and show a win, because then A, you get the buy-in for anybody you need to get the buy-in, whether it's the board, the investors, employees, like whoever needs to be in. And B, it can by itself then finance the next step because the company is now making more money and you can do more stuff. So I love all these points. I think they're incredibly valuable. How do I identify? So in my eyes, what you just said, as a business owner, you just confused me a little more, because so far I was thinking ChatGPT and I didn't know where to start. Now I got ChatGPT and I've got sensing and I've got actions that I can take across different aspects. How do I know to pick that stuff that is additive, low risk, quick win that I need to start with?
The first part of that is just start with, get some good advice. Okay. Because if you do the maths in the UK, in the 2021 census, there were 109,000 people who recorded their job as systems architect, solution designer, or business analyst.
Okay.
There's 5.5 million businesses in the UK, 1.8 million of which have more than 1,000 employees. Even if there were 100,000 AI people, the chance of you recruiting or finding one is about 35 minutes, is your share of the resource pool. Okay. They're just rare people. So the first thing you need to do is a strategy to either get a good person to help you, or a strategy to grow some people in your own organization that learn these tools.
Okay.
Which is another reason why you need safe places for them to learn.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to become unsuccessful. So let's just drift into trying to find candidates of what AI is good at and what people are good at.
Awesome.
AI is good at a bunch of things, but what it's really good at, if you think about large language models as a use case, is dull things: extraction and summary, transformation, translation, interpretation, sentiment setting, prediction, stuff that is just really basically what you would call the utility room of computing. It's the dishwasher of your house. It's not exciting stuff.
Yeah.
No one cares if the computer does it. The thing that ChatGPT brings in, a lot of times models bring in, they radically lower the cost of doing those tasks in an automated way.
Yeah.
If you wanted to automate your email workflow before, you had to do data transformation, you had to do this, you had to do that, you had to do process. That was all really quite hard. The language tools are really good at that general purpose language management, which historically IS systems have been poor at, which is why those problems have been left alone. So we like to say AI is good at joining dots. As a simple metaphor, it's good at joining dots. So the opposite of that is, what are people good at? People are good at relationships. They're good at dealing with the unexpected. They're good at dealing with the unknown. They're good at imagining a new way of doing things. So they're good at making new dots. So you've got this almost beautiful sort of symbiosis where something that likes is the wrong word, something that cares not how many times it does a mundane job. Dots to dots is a thing you could have. People who like doing new, interesting work, but not doing the mundane, now have a way to be creative and be expressive. So it's about bringing these two things together to make what we describe an augmented AI experience, where you're using these AI tools to essentially give your everyday work superpowers to your people. So you're going from thinking about how can I get a productivity saving, or how can I get a reduction in effort, to actually how can I get to a significant value gain for everybody. And this is where we now stray into how do you do a business case for CFO? We have a fairly simple pitch process for that.
So before we dive into this, I want to add one thing. I just came back from a great conference. It's called MACON. It's the Marketing AI Conference, and it was in Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the speakers was the chief decision officer at Google. She's incredibly smart and yet has this amazing skill to take really complex stuff and turn it into words that normal people like you and me can understand. And she was talking about the whole idea behind AI and where's it going is it differentiates between thinking and thunking, which thunking is a word she made up.
Yeah.
But thinking is what humans are very good at.
Yes.
Is taking something that did not exist before and thinking about it and making this new idea out of it. Thunking is the stuff that you do once you finish the thinking in order to make the thing actually happen.
Yeah.
Which a machine does a lot better. And it does it a lot better because it has access to a lot more data. It has a lot more memory than you and I have. And hence it's very good at these repetitive data analytics kind of things. And so if you cut the line between thinking and thunking, which is basically what you're saying, and I think the biggest difference, that's not a new concept. I think the new concept is that we've pushed the line of thunking way further ahead than it was before because there were tasks, not that they were thinking tasks, it's just tasks that computers did not know how to do easily until a year ago. And even that's not totally true. It was available to Netflix and Google and Facebook and these companies, just wasn't available to us, the common people, in an amount of money that we could afford.
Correct.
And now it costs you either $0 or $20 a month, and you get access to an API that can do things that just were not doable earlier. So I love the way you framed it. And now let's dive into your framework on how to pick the business cases.
So we always start, quite often that conversation starts with the CFO. Always someone says, well, how do I persuade my CFO? Okay. I've been in business 20 years and I've sat in board meeting after board meeting where we've done the strategy and the financial review for the next year. And it always starts with something like this. The CEO says to the chief commercial officer, I need you to save 0.5% margin. And then they'll say to the HR director, I need you to save 0.25% margin. And they'll go around and you'll think, if we can get another 1.5 or 2% margin in this company next year, that would be great for us. Because that's straight bottom line profit. So it's all about margin. Okay. So I say, what if we think about your human resource spend, which is typically 70% of your cost, excluding stock, excluding property. So it's, of your manageable cost, it's 70%. What if you could make those all 10% better? So that gives you a net 7% gain in margin. Would you like that? I haven't yet found a CFO who doesn't want 7% margin gain. Okay.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's use AI to get 7% then. And they're like, okay, that's a good idea. Okay. That's quite nice. But the problem with that is there's no one to do AI in your organization. You can't do your plan. What if there were some projects that were on the to-do list, but had always been put off because they were a bit not a good return on investment? All those things like social responsibility, well-being, all of those soft processy type things that just never happen. But actually, your shareholders are saying, what is your ESG agenda? What is your social responsibility? What if we used some of that 7% saving to do those projects? You say, well, that would be good. Actually, I've got better news for you. Actually, it's not 7%. It's probably nearly 20%. So you could have your 7% for free for your shareholders. They're happy. You're happy. You could take the next 10% and invest that into doing these long-term shareholder projects. Yeah. You could use AI to drive some of those out. You can use them to train you around. And that generates you a set of people who are skilled in being able to do even more of this. And then I'll usually look at the HR director and say, just remind me again, motivated, well-trained staff add what productivity to company? I think you'll find the number's 60%. So you're going to do these two things to get 20% unlocked from your business. And you're going to end up with a set of people that have just been doing projects that they like doing, that were interesting, that retrained them to unlock a further 60% at the end of the process. You're already at 100% target, 80% target. And actually, 20% is a low bar number. If you look at the stats from the employment plans for the US for the impact of AI, same in the UK, same from McKinsey, they're talking about 45 to 47%
Yeah.
revenue gain. So
Yeah.
if you want to unlock and have a change program that's going to work, you've got to address the question, what do you want to do in the business, generate value? How are you going to do it? You're going to do a bunch of projects that are safe to learn on, that are low risk, to retrain our staff because there's always going to be a staff shortage. We're going to end up with motivated staff. So you're looking to generate, how we phrase it, wouldn't it be good if AI generated value for everybody for good? Why wouldn't you do that? And usually, by now, the CFO and the board are like, this seems like a reasonable plan. Where do we really start now? We're bought into it. We're going to start. We need to start. We're bought into the idea of the exact where.
Yeah.
And then the exact where, we try and target a combination of impactful enough, safe enough, and enough risk that there's an impediment to do it. So it's got to solve a problem. It's got to solve an itch, but not crazy risk. Like, for example, if you're clinical practitioners, would you immediately let AI do all your diagnosis? No, that's just a bad idea. However, would you let it help fill in the 60% of administrative time that once you've seen a patient, the clinical practitioner can't do because he's got 35 forms to fill in? That to me seems like a safer place to go than the other. And the same if you're a sales oriented business with a call center. If you've got 5-star customer service in your call center, leave it the heck alone. If you've got 1-star customer service in your call center, then maybe it is a good idea because it's not going to make it any worse. So we try and sit down with the board and find these itches, these challenges, and say, okay, that feels like something you feel you want to do, something you feel will get value, and something that is within your board's level of risk appetite. And every company, every board's risk appetite is a little bit different. But broadly speaking, the companies that are implementing AI now want to be leaders as opposed to laggards. So they tend to have a little bit more appetite for risk at a board level than the others. And also, my experience is they tend to have a little bit more appetite for risk than the CIO or the IT department or the business themselves actually realizes, if you can express it and control it in a sensible way.
I love this. I want to touch on two really interesting and important points that you touched. One is, at the end of the day, decisions in a company are based on the financial outcome.
Absolutely.
Meaning, yes, it's very important to get the buy-in from the employees and train them and get them motivated and whatever. But at the end of the day, the CFO/CEO will make the decision based on, is this going to make us more money or less money to ourselves and to the shareholders? And so the framework you shared is brilliant, because I've never heard anybody talk about this. People talking about how to get employees trained and how to do this, but not about, okay, we can do all of that, but nobody will ever do this if it doesn't really make sense from a financial perspective, because that's what a company does.
Yeah.
The second thing that I really is the idea behind the ethical aspect of this. And to be fair, I would assume, and I've seen this, so it's not just an assumption, let's call it an educated assumption, that this will cost some jobs. Meaning, if you're saying, okay, I have X employees, 30 employees that are doing this task, and now I can do this task 30% more efficient, you have two options. One option is to say, I'm going to let go of 30% of the employees and get immediate savings to the bottom line. That's the less ethical and long-term, I think, less profitable option. The other option is to look at other parts of the organization which are connected to that 30% and saying, can we push them 30% that now we can sell 30% more or 50% more because of these capabilities with the same resources that we have today? And now everybody wins, because now you have, like you said, happier employees. They're doing stuff they care about. It's more ethical because you didn't just let people go. And the company grows, you're making more money, you're growing market share, and so on. So I think the truth in most companies will depend, A, on the economical situation they're in, and B, somewhere in the middle between these two things. I think it's going to be very naive to think that people are not going to be let go because of these new capabilities. But I think the right way to look at this from a leadership perspective is, can we push the boundaries across multiple aspects of the business? So instead of letting people go, we grow the business even more and use the same resources we have today.
I think when we have this conversation, and it obviously occurs, is that the first thing is, you need to consider the fixed labor fallacy. Okay. The fixed labor fallacy is there's a finite amount of work to do. Okay. If you go to any business and say, show me your business strategy, how many projects of that business strategy are only going to be done this year? And what's your backlog in number of years of projects do you have? If you go to a major, I did some work in a FTSE 100 retailer in the UK. And when I joined, they had a backlog of projects, assuming the same IT resource going out for 11 years. Okay. There was no shortage of work. What there was a cost barrier that made the projects too expensive to do today. What these new tools do is they lower the cost barrier. So actually those projects that would have been efficiency gain or would be nice to have after just become accessible. And I think McKinsey was saying that there's a growing width between a leader and a laggard, and it's about 35% market growth. So if you're a leader, you're likely to be gaining more market than a laggard. And what happens is that gap doesn't narrow over time. The laggards never catch up. They actually get further behind and there's a very sad situation happening in the UK where a large retailer is in the process of going bankrupt. And they're going bankrupt because 10 years ago, when they had the opportunity to pursue a digital transformation strategy, they chose not to.
Yeah.
Okay. There will be companies right now choosing to not pursue an AI strategy or to use AI purely for cost reduction. In 10 years' time, we will be remembering who they were. We won't be visiting who they are.
I agree with you 100%. Only I think it's in 3 years' time, but that's a whole different story.
I only have data to base it on, which is currently, it says 10 years to go out of business.
I just think things are moving so much faster right now that your ability to win or lose market share because of these new capabilities are very different than everything we've seen before. And so the timelines of everything is just going to be much shorter. And I don't know if it's 3 years or 4 years or 5, but I don't think 10 is the number, even though if it was in the past. I want to switch gears because there was something we talked about in our early call that I'm really interested in. And you said something that I personally agree with 100%, and I think will be very interesting to share. You said that prompt engineering is not a thing, and I agree with you. It's prompt engineering is a UX problem. It was created because this tool was released when nobody was ready for it. And so people had to figure out how to engineer a prompt. Even today, there are tools out there that will do it for you. So I think that's not a thing that anybody should pay attention to. I think it's a skill that's easy to learn. And I think it's going to be a skill that's even not going to be more or less required in the very near future because the models will do it for you. So what you do need to understand is what needs to be in the prompt, not from an engineering way, but from a what is the results that I'm trying to get. And I know you have a framework for that. So I'm very curious to hear what it is.
Let's leap into, we've chosen to do a chat-based implementation of something.
Yeah.
So the idea behind generating a large language model-based ChatGPT or Claude or whoever is you want to unlock productivity. Okay. That's the key to the thing. You want to unlock productivity. Productivity is unlocked in two ways. It makes the thing quicker. That's nice. It makes a thing quicker repeatably, so you don't need to invent the way to make it quicker. That's really nice. Okay. Prompt engineering is, as you said, it's a UX problem. It's a feature of now.
Yeah.
There's an interesting quote, and I wish I could remember who said it first, but we use it all the time. And it's that every problem can be solved provided you can create a good question. Okay. And a prompt is basically a good question if you get it right. And we use the 3 C's to describe how to put together a good prompt. And the first one is the C of curiosity, which is you should spend a little bit of time toying with the opening sentence, the first question. And we encourage people to try open questions and closed questions. Open questions tend to generate ideas and concepts. Closed questions tend to derive answers. But swapping between the two with ChatGPT can often trigger you to get to a phrase that gives you exactly what you're looking for. Now, the problem with asking ChatGPT any question is we all know 18% of the time it just makes it up. It just hallucinates it, right? So the next C is critical thinking. Okay, so you've got to, when you get a response from you, you need to ask yourself a bunch of questions. My first favorite question is, did it actually answer the question I just gave it? Or did it answer something similar? Or did it answer it really earnestly and really well? But actually, having read the answer, I realized my question was a little bit less good. Okay. So a good example of that we use is, imagine you're planning a weekend in London and you just say to ChatGPT, tell me some things to do in London. It's going to give you a massive list of things to do. If you say to it, tell me some things to do in London on Thursday near Covent Garden. I don't want to walk around. I like art museums. I like coffee shops. I don't want to go to the cinema. I don't want to go to Madame Tussauds. You've now created a much better prompt.
Yeah.
You've asked a much better question. You're going to get a much better, much more concise answer. But of course, you've got to be mindful that the data in the model ended at a point in time. So it might just have recommended you to go to a really great coffee shop that's closed, because since September 2021 and today it's closed, or it's closed on a Thursday. So there's a really good tool I like to recommend people to use in conjunction with ChatGPT. We call it Google. You might have heard of it. Okay. And that comes down to, we steal a phrase from the cryptocurrency world, which is you need to do your own research. So when you've got the answer, you're finding you've got this critical question, you've got a good question, it's giving you a good answer. You just need to look at it and say, do I believe it's truthful? Do I believe it's factually accurate? And there's one trick I often recommend people use to help with that process in complex prompts. And this, a good example of this is if you're imagine you want to create 5 recipes. Okay. So I'd like you to invent me 5 recipes, and 1 for each evening meal. Next week, I want them to take 30 minutes to prepare. I'm allergic to salmon. Rather than just pressing go, if you then say, give me the recipe titles and then ask before you proceed, it will just give you the titles. And then you can immediately check from a small amount of human input, i.e. reading, whether it's called salmon with teriyaki sauce. So you know if you get that, you've got a bad response. So if you can engineer a 2-step prompt, you can use that first summary step to catch hallucination or misfacts, falsehoods, fake news, maybe, as a catch-all. So we recommend that. Be curious, build a good question, refine your question, and then be critical of the answer. That's the first of the 2 C's. Then the second C is consolidation. So I'm going to explain to you my typical journey of how a prompt building goes. I'm going to see from your face whether this resonates with you. So I start off at the beginning and I've got an idea what I want to do. I type some stuff in, it gets some stuff, I type some more in. And then I get that feeling of I'm getting somewhere, but I'm feeling a bit lost. I'm not entirely sure how I got here now. But regardless, you carry on. And then you get to the, okay, I'm here now, but I genuinely am not sure how I got here. I'm actually lost. I've got the answer, but I don't know how I got it. When you get that feeling inside you, that's the time to stop. Okay. Do not prompt on. Don't go down what we call the prompt hole. Call it there. Scroll back up the page and think, how can I consolidate this process into a fresh starting prompt? Okay. And that's really important because you may be carrying bias or context from your false answers from your journey into your prompt at this moment in time. And the longer you speak with ChatGPT, the longer that context gets. The longer the context window is extended, the more chance you have of hallucinations or false data. So when you get that slightly uncomfortable feeling of, I'm getting a bit of this now, that's when you should consolidate down, rebuild the prompt back to one cohesive prompt and see if you can restart it, perhaps in a new chat window, and get back to exactly where you were. If you've got a prompt that does that, then you've achieved the ultimate goal, right? You've got a prompt that's done a piece of work for you. The only thing you need to do now to achieve full productivity is write it down in not ChatGPT, build a playbook, consolidate it into, like, I use Notion. I've got a friend at work who uses Word, and I just literally have a page that says, this prompt does this. Here's the prompt. And then next time around, when I want to do the same things I've done before, whether it's a market assessment or a summarization, or I want to check, see whether the article I've just written is in my tone of voice, I've got those prompts pre-canned. I just copy, paste. And I've not had to do that whole 45 minutes of exploration. I've just gone to instant productivity.
So I love everything you're saying. I want to pause you to add some tactical, practical tidbits that I use myself and that I teach in my courses, I give to my consulting clients. So the first thing, there's a tool called perplexity.ai, which is basically ChatGPT connected to the internet, which solves some of the problems that you talked about in the beginning. Go check on Google if it exists. The benefit with Perplexity is that it actually shows you the links of where it got the data from. So if it gives you the link to that coffee shop, you can click on it. It will take you to the coffee shop's website. You're like, oh, yes, this really exists. They actually are open on Thursday or not. So that's small tip number one. Small tip number two, as far as potentially shortening the process or giving it less context when it's not relevant. When you go start a chat with ChatGPT and you keep on going and going, the first time it gives you a bad answer, you have two options. And by the way, most people don't know these two options. Most people just keep going and ask the follow-up question or try to correct ChatGPT. But next to each prompt, there's a little pencil kind of button that you can press and edit the prompt. And the difference between editing the prompt and re-asking the question is exactly what you said. If you edit the prompt, ChatGPT will not remember what was in the original prompt. So if it gave you an answer that is not aligned with what you're asking for, you want to edit the prompt rather than ask a follow-up clarification question. And the reason for that is ChatGPT will remember the wrong answer that it gave you earlier, and it will use it as part of its memory when it gives you the future answers within the same chat. So one of the steps that you can do instead of just starting a new chat is just edit the prompt that gave you as soon as it happens. This is not exactly what I wanted. Instead of asking a clarification question, go and edit that prompt, and you can ask something completely different or just slightly different until you get what you wanted, and only then move on. So that's tip number two. Tip number three is with regards to a prompt database. What you're saying is critical, and it's as critical to make it available to the rest of the company, meaning use a tool that everybody has access to, define some rules on taxonomy and how we write these things and how we define what they do, and maybe tagging mechanism that people know what to look for and how to look for, so we don't keep on reinventing the wheel across different people in the organization. And the last thing that I use a lot, and I've used it way before ChatGPT, but now with ChatGPT and Bard and Claude, etc., I use it even more. There's a browser plugin that's called Magical. What Magical enables you to do is take a long piece of text, paste it in there, and give it a shortcut. And the shortcut could be any combination of words, of characters, right? So it could be an actual word, which doesn't make sense, and you'll understand why in a minute. But once you put in that shortcut, it will put in the full long text that you have pasted into the tool, which means if there's a prompt you use regularly or a segment of a prompt you use regularly, such as to prime it as, you are an expert on this and that topic, you have done this and that, here are 3 examples on how to, don't put it in a Word document somewhere, because then you got to open and find the Word document and copy and paste. If you put it in Magical and you give it a shortcut saying prime 1, when you know what that means, you type prime 1 and all this text shows up every time. So that's, again, just another very simple tactical way to implement some of the things that Paul is talking about, but all are incredibly valuable points.
I've kind of like a tip on the tip.
Okay, awesome.
When you write your prompt page to share, if just in the top of it, you just stream of conscious what you used it for, then you should do what we did, which is we then wrote a prompt which looks at all of the prompts and extracts into CSV tags metadata. So you can then search on metadata for what the prompts are about. So we have a search for like research prompts, language prompts, that kind of stuff. So, and if you use Notion, you can actually set that as an AI automatically generated field. So whenever you add the page, it will just magically create the tags as a CSV. So that's how we re-index ours. We let the AI do the dual indexing work.
That's awesome. That's a great tip. Okay, so now we're missing only the third C.
Third C, which is consolidate.
Oh, that was the third C.
That was it. Just get it into a playbook. Use copy paste. I mean, there is a bit of a moving window on integrations for ChatGPT. And we say there's 3 ways of thinking about ChatGPT and apps and plugins. So the first is you've got ChatGPT straight, which is you're using ChatGPT. You then have ChatGPT with plugins, which is where you're trying to put your app into ChatGPT. And at the moment, the apps, plugins in ChatGPT is a bit like, remember when the App Store first came out and there was like 10,000 apps that just made fart noises?
Yeah.
At the moment, the plugin store is a bit the same, right? It's 10,000 apps, of which 5 do really cool things and 9,000 do stuff which has the use case of the developer who wrote it. It has no value to anyone. Like Wolfram Alpha is a classic go-to. Link Reader, Ask My PDF, the ones at the top of the list when you do most install, those are the ones to play with. And then the third thing, which you see more and more of, is where people are putting large language models in their app directly.
Yeah.
So that's where you're getting, and I think you'll see a lot more of that, and particularly in enterprise with low code. What you'll find is they essentially put a simple form in front of a large language model as part of the process automation. I think you'll see more and more of that as the enterprise sort of solutions mature and low code solutions of automation fits in behind. So I think you'll see this move away from plugins. I think they're a short-term solution. And I think you'll end up with essentially using the tool directly itself, or it'll be fronted by some form of data formatting tool to make it a more repeatable process. So I think that's how it will consolidate from a toolset point of view.
I completely agree. Paul, this was really fascinating, extremely helpful, I think, to anybody who is in a leadership position and thinking how to get started. I thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this information.
I listen to your podcast most commutes when I'm going to and from the office. Even with all my experience and doing things, I still pick up tips on the way. I think, I really need to have a go at that, which is why I'm deep into N8N at the moment, having played with that. I heard that on one of your podcasts. So.
One of my favorite toys right now. That's a whole different podcast in itself. Paul, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Have a great day. Take care.
Great conversation with Paul. The silver lining through everything we talked about, and it's something I highlight frequently to the customers I'm consulting to, is that implementing AI in a business is first and foremost a strategic business process, and only then an AI implementation process. So it's not different than doing any other big changes in your company. It requires figuring out strategy and processes and risk, etc. And only then the AI part of this, but it's definitely worth doing because the positive impact is very dramatic. And now to some exciting news from this past week. The first big news I want to share with you is that OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is on path to making over $1 billion in revenue in the next 12 months. Now, this is significant because of several different things. First of all, because they projected they would make around $200 million this year, and now they're on path to making $1 billion. That means that they grew dramatically faster than they themselves anticipated. The second thing is, all of last year, they made $28 million in revenue, and now they're making $80 million a month. This revenue comes from 2 main sources. One is people who are paying for the premium ChatGPT service, and the other payment comes from people who are using the API. So every API call costs you a fragment of $1 and sometimes fragments of cents, depending on how big the API call is. But these obviously accumulate over time through the usage of multiple people and companies. What does that tell me? That tells me that despite the fact that there's some people that are saying the hype was overrated and that there's been a decline in traffic to their website, which is true, it's still in extremely high demand. I really can't think of many companies in history that in less than a year of releasing their product and much less than a year releasing a paid product got to a pace of $80 million in revenue per month. So that tells you that there's something real behind it and that there's real need and real usage and real value because people are willing to pay for it. Speaking of large language models, Baidu, the Chinese tech giant, just released Ernie chatbot, which is based on a large language model, also called Ernie, that they have developed. And it is the first of its kind that's being released in China. As you expect in China, it first had to go through the scrutiny of the Chinese government. And first of all, had to show compliance with China's generative AI guidelines, which they released a few months ago, which we shared on this podcast. But in addition, as you would expect from a Chinese chatbot, its views are limited to the views that are allowed in China. And as an interesting example, if you ask it where was COVID-19 originated, it will tell you that it originated amongst American vape users in July of 2019 and later only made its way to Wuhan, China through American imported lobsters. So whether you want to believe our side of the truth or their side of the truth is up to you, but it tells you that, and there's top-down guidance to what is the reality and the truth that this chatbot can share, and it has to be aligned with what the Chinese government will allow. I'm totally not surprised by this. This was expected. The interesting part about this, it's the first time that a large language model had to comply with government regulations before it got released. And yes, it's China, so they have better chances of doing this, but I would really like to see that kind of approach to releasing large language models all over the world, where there's clear guidelines that you have to comply with before you can make the large language model available to the public. The next two pieces of news I want to share with you this week has to do more with the graphic side of things. The more important one is that Google just released a new digital watermark. It's called Synth ID that works with its AI suite of tools. It's a development by Google's DeepMind team. And the idea is that it's a watermark that cannot be removed, that is not visible in the actual image itself, but is easily detectable by a detection tool. And the idea behind it is to eliminate the opportunity for deepfakes, meaning it will be easy for anyone to know whether a picture is a real image or was it actually generated by AI. This is obviously an extremely important move because from my personal perspective, the most immediate big concern about AI is the ability to create deepfakes, meaning the ability to manipulate the truth in the digital communication across everything that we do on the day-to-day, whether it's personal communication or business communication or general news. There is really no way today to tell the truth between AI-generated content and real content unless such tools are being widely implemented. So that this move by Google will be adopted either with their technology or any other technology across the board as something the government will impose, which will allow us humans to know what is real and what is not. And speaking of deep fake images, the ability to generate selfies of yourself that are not real is becoming more and more popular across multiple platforms and apps like Lensa, as an example. They all work kind of the same. You upload multiple images of yourself, and then you can generate really cool, sophisticated images of yourself in different outfits and different setups of your hair and different environments and so on. Now, this is really cool and useful. And the piece of news from this week is that Snapchat just created a feature like that built into Snapchat itself, which means it's going to be used a lot more by people because of all the existing Snapchat users. Snapchat calls this new feature Dreams. And the interesting thing is that it's a paid feature and you can buy packs of these cool AI generated selfies. If you enjoyed this episode or the podcast overall, please recommend it to people that you know that can benefit from it. Share it either directly with them on DMs or on social media. And please rate and rank the podcast on the platform you're listening to. That helps us reach more people, which means you are helping more people learn from the podcast as well. And I really appreciate if you would do that. And until next time, play with AI, try different things. Don't be shy. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know what you think of the podcast. If you have any ideas or topics you want me to discuss. And until next time, have an amazing week.